Hello, this week we're going to talk about understanding culture, and I'm going to cover the importance and defining characteristics of culture, what co cultures are, and their role in communication. I'm also going to talk about the impact of prejudice on communication and the suggestions to reduce it, as well as the cultural dimensions that influence how people communicate and how to improve your intercultural communication competence. Let's talk about culture. So, when we're talking about culture, we understand that it is an established, coherent set of beliefs, attitudes, values, and practices shared by a large group of people. So, if you are just an individual and you have your own set of beliefs and attitudes, it doesn't make it as a culture because what we understand is that cultures involve a group of people who share the same set of beliefs, attitudes, and values. And we also understand that culture is learned. We learn our cultural beliefs, attitudes, and values from many sources. We learn how to move about in the world because, for instance, if you're raised by your parents, or if you're raised by your grandparents, those are the people that influence us when we first understand how we should behave, how we should think, how we should communicate, right? So as you move into going to school, then your teachers and your peers, as well as your probably if you go to if you practice your religion, then your religious leaders and the mass media that you consume or the social media that you consume will help you to understand how you should dress, how you should act, how you should, what is it? Basically, interact with other people in your daily life. We also learn that culture is communicated, that each culture has its own practices regarding how to communicate, and therefore it is layered. Many of us belong to more than just one culture. For example, if your background is from a specific ethnic background, you're probably part of that culture. But when you go to school and then you interact with teachers, with your peers, with your fellow students, and then you understand that you need to adopt the school culture or the college culture. And then if you have your own, for instance, group of friends who may, for instance, form um, a musical group or band, then you understand that you go into that culture of music culture that shape who you are and shape part of your identity. And then we understand also that culture is lived. It influences how we talk, the way we think, dress, and even eat. Now, let's talk a bit about co-cultures. So, according to co-cultural communication theory, the people who have more power within a society determine the dominant culture because they decide the prevailing views, values, and traditions of the society. Essentially, they construct the social standards for that society. So think about when the US was first established, right? When it was first founded, the only people allowed to vote were land owning males of European ancestry. And so, as consequence, what is thought of as American culture is tilted towards the interests, activities, and accomplishments of these men. So, members of a society who don't conform to the dominant culture in their language, values, lifestyle, or even physical appearance often form what are called as co-cultures. And they have their own cultures that coexist within a dominant cultural sphere. So, members of non-dominant co-cultures face challenges when interacting with members of the dominant culture. According to co-cultural theory, communicators can use any of these three primary strategies in this situation. They can assimilate, they can blend in with the dominant culture, They can try to accommodate, which you do this by fitting into the dominant culture while maintaining your own identity. Or the third one is you can go the other way and you approach it with separation, which means that you preserve your group identity that's distinct from the dominant culture. Now, much of how we view ourselves and how we relate to others grows from our cultural and co-cultural identity, the groups with which we identify. Where do we come from? What's our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, our age, our socio-economic status? These have become increasingly important factors in interpersonal communication in the present day. So consider these following co-cultures: race and ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age and generation, your disabilities, as well as socio-economic status. So when we're thinking about race is a social construction that categorizes people by physical traits, cultural traits, and ancestry. So race has no biological basis, and this is something that's so fascinating. People like to make separation between races, but those kind of categorizations, yeah, is what we call as social constructions that is not based on biology. And then ethnicity refers to the degree to which a person identifies with a particular group, usually on the basis of nationality, culture, or some other unifying perspective. Recognizing that culture is multidimensional, scholars have developed the concept of intersectionality to describe the interplay of social categories, including gender, race, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and disability status. So we as an individual, we have this kind of intersectionality that we live in. And that interplays and shape the identity of who we are. And our gender shape our experience in life. Our race shapes the way we move about the world. Our socioeconomic status also shapes how we live in this world. And talk about sexual orientation and ability or disability. Now, when we're thinking about all of these different co-cultures, we are also thinking about intercultural communication, because all of these people that belong to different groups need to communicate with one another. So intercultural communication occurs when members of two or more cultures or co-cultures exchange messages in a manner that is influenced by their different cultural perceptions and symbol systems, both verbal and nonverbal. Because all of us belong to many groups, such as ethnic, economic, interest-based, age-related groups, you might be asking whether there is any communication that is not intercultural. And the answer is yes. Intercultural communication doesn't always occur when people from different cultures interact. It depends on the salience or the weight you attach to a particular person or phenomenon. So when the intercultural communication, so the question becomes, when does intercultural communication happen? It happens when you put much weight into it, when that interaction is important, and when it's meaningful, then it becomes an intercultural communication. So now let us talk about barriers to intercultural communication. We have ethnocentrism, which is the belief that one's own cultural group, usually equated with nationality, is superior to all other cultural groups. When we have this bias that made us think that our group is so much better than other groups, that is what we call as ethnocentrism. And then we also have stereotypes, which is widely held beliefs about a group of people and are a form of generalization. Then we also have prejudice, which is negative attitude toward a cultural group based on little or no experience. Whereas stereotypes tells us what a group is like, prejudice tells us how we are likely to feel about a group. Yeah. And then we also have discrimination, which is the behavior that results from stereotyping or prejudice. And we're talking about overt actions to exclude, avoid, or distance oneself from other groups. And discrimination may be based on racism or any other isms. One way of thinking about discrimination is that power plus prejudice equals ism. So, people are likely to rely on stereotypes about racial and gender characteristics, since these are the things we are likely to notice first when encountering new people. When stereotypes towards groups and their members are coupled with negative affect, feelings, or emotions, and a predisposition to behave negatively towards those people, they become prejudice. And this can be amplified when people see these groups negatively portrayed by the media. So it is so unfortunately how our view of the world and how our view of other groups that don't belong into our groups are so colored by the news, the social media, and the information that we learn about the other groups. So there needs to be this curiosity to go beyond reading what we are so used to reading to be able to understand the other group. To further improve this, we may want to try to actually interact with them in everyday life when possible. Yeah, because prejudice, no matter the particular target, is always destructive and it's unethical. So now let's talk about cultural influences on communications. Scholars suggest that 7 dimensions underlie cultural differences in our interpersonal communication. We're talking about individualism versus collectivism, where one culture values individualisms while other culture values these ideas of collectivism or this idea of community. And then we're also talking about uncertainty avoidance, and most likely this is when there's a conflict happens, right? Whether you're willing to actually face the conflict or you do all you can to avoid conflicts. And then there's also power distance. Yeah, some cultures put so much emphasis on the power distance. And then there's this high and low context, emotion displays, masculinity versus femininity, as well as how they values and their views of time. I do strongly suggest you to read the chapter because the chapter will go deeper into each part of this, 7 dimensions. And my PowerPoint slides will also help you to understand better, to understand each of these dimensions. So, in order for you to be able to develop intercultural communication competence, these following aspects are key. The first one is motivation and attitudes. The second one is tolerance for ambiguity. The next one is open-mindedness. And then having the knowledge and skills to navigate these intercultural communications, as well as having patience and perseverance. I do want you to listen to the NPR podcast that provide the link here, and I also upload it on your course website, and then answer the lecture check questions based on this chapter. I really look forward to reading your answers, and I'm hoping that you will enjoy listening to the NPR podcast. Thank you.